Late last night, during what should have been a routine team meeting, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski walked into the room and dropped a bomb that stunned everyone. He didn't ease into it. He didn't sugarcoat it. No eye contact, no emotion. Just 4 cold words. Dillon Gabriel starts Sunday. Shedeur Sanders, benched, indefinitely. And just like that, chaos detonated across Cleveland. Veterans were stunned. Rookies froze. Offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt even tried to intervene, reportedly telling Stefanski they should reconsider. The response? Simple, brutal. Decisions final, meetings over. This wasn't strategy. It was a declaration of war. Inside team walls, the divide split instantly. Offensive linemen reportedly backed Stefanski's system-first philosophy. Skill players, wideouts, backs, even tight ends immediately rallied behind Sanders. Fans, they erupted. Over 3,000 ticket refunds hit the Browns system in under 20 minutes. Hashtags like Free Shedeur and Fire Stefanski started trending globally. And while Cleveland scrambled to hold itself together, the NFL was watching. So were the Cowboys. Because this wasn't just about who starts one game. This was about everything. Control versus player empowerment. Old school philosophy versus new school confidence. Stefanski versus Sanders wasn't a quarterback battle. It was a full-blown philosophical war playing out on the national stage. And now, the league's loudest media names are diving in. Players are choosing sides. Ownership is panicking. Even sponsors are calling the league office. It's no longer a quarterback controversy. It's a cultural crisis wearing shoulder pads. And the worst part? The game hasn't even started yet. It was supposed to be just another Wednesday. A standard team meeting, roster updates, practice installs, maybe a film cut or two. What happened instead felt more like a funeral, only without the warning. According to multiple sources within the Browns facility, Kevin Stefanski entered the room already angry. He skipped the usual small talk, didn't acknowledge players or staff, and went straight to the lectern. There was no build-up, no "we've made a tough decision" speech, just a 12-second silence. Then 4 words that detonated the locker room. Dillon Gabriel starts Sunday. No clarification, no mention of Shedeur Sanders, just silence. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Veterans like Amari Cooper reportedly exchanged wide-eyed glances. Some rookies looked completely frozen. And Shedeur? He didn't flinch. Multiple players say he sat motionless. Then, slowly, he stood, nodded once at no one in particular, and walked out of the room without saying a word. Not a protest, not a stare down, just an exit, so professional it made the silence feel louder. But this wasn't some heat-of-the-moment coach's call. This was weeks in the making. Insiders say Stefanski had been quietly building a case to make this move. He reportedly created a detailed log of what he considered violations by Shedeur, arriving late to optional walkthroughs, doing unauthorized media, bringing in documentary film crews, even something as granular as audibling during practice. To the players, it looked like initiative. To Stefanski, it looked like insubordination. And then came the final spark. During red zone drills, Shedeur ran an off-script play, hit Amari Cooper for a touchdown, got the crowd going, and Stefanski erupted later off-camera. The message sent? Obey the system or pay the price. Except now, the price might be Stefanski's own career. Because that one decision didn't just remove a quarterback, it shattered the team's chemistry, exposed deep fractures in the organization, and put a franchise that was quietly building momentum straight into the biggest crisis of the NFL season. And we're just getting started. The moment Shedeur Sanders walked out of that meeting, the entire building changed. It didn't take hours. It didn't take days. It took seconds for the Browns locker room to go from competitive to something that looked and felt eerily like a civil war. Players chose sides. No hesitation. Reports say offensive linemen, the guys who swear by structure and routine, aligned with Stefanski almost immediately. To them, it was about discipline, about respecting the system. Their thinking? If the coach draws up the play, you run it, period. But on the other side, the skill guys, the playmakers, the sparks, they didn't just support Shedeur. They rallied around him like he was the only guy fighting for them. Receivers, running backs, even cornerbacks were whispering about the coaching staff acting like dictators instead of developers. One source said, if you make a great play and it pisses off your coach, maybe it's not the play that's the problem. Inside practice the next day, the damage was obvious. Players weren't mixing like they used to. Receivers and tight ends started running drills with Sanders, even though he was technically demoted to scout team. Meanwhile, Gabriel ran with the first team, but his reps felt cold, forced, and disconnected. The coaching staff tried to maintain order and failed completely. Veterans reportedly began staggering their workout times to avoid crossing paths or conflicts. Weight room sessions became a chessboard of stretched-out silences. Even lunch shifts self-segregated. Stefanski's loyalists at one table, Shedeur's supporters at another. Neutral players ate quickly and disappeared faster. Suddenly, football wasn't the priority anymore. Survival was. The Browns didn't just lose chemistry, they lost culture. Overnight. And while Stefanski doubled down on system standards, his grip on the team was slipping faster than ever. Because what good is structure if half the roster doesn't believe in the guy running it? One coach, speaking anonymously, summed it up best. At this point, it's not Shedeur versus Dylan, it's everyone versus each other. On the surface, benching Shedeur Sanders looked like a football decision, a system-first call by a head coach sticking to his principles. But once you step inside the walls of the Browns facility, it becomes clear. This wasn't about football. This was about power. Sources say Kevin Stefanski had been compiling a quiet case against Sanders for weeks. Late arrivals to optional walkthroughs, media appearances done without approval, a documentary crew filming behind the scenes, talking to Barstool when he should have been watching film, audibling in practice, improvising in red zone drills, commanding too much attention, creating too much energy. To an outdated playbook, those aren't perks, they're threats. And to an old-school head coach raised in NFL hierarchy, that's rebellion. Stefanski isn't just any coach, he's textbook. Earn your snaps, don't rock the boat. Protect the system at all costs. Study the script, don't rewrite it. And when a rookie strolls into the building with swagger, cameras, and a last name like Sanders, the default setting is defensive. Privately, players say this was never about Dylan Gabriel. He was just a pawn in a bigger chess match, a safe, quiet system follower the coaching staff could elevate to justify benching the guy who was stealing the spotlight. From the outside looking in, Shedeur was flashing signs of a budding star. Confident, calm, connecting with media, fans, and teammates, playing the long game with maturity way beyond his years. But inside Cleveland, that was interpreted as arrogance. Not because it was, but because it didn't fit inside Stefanski's box. And when Shedeur started making highlight plays that weren't drawn on the whiteboard, that's when the war began. This wasn't coach versus quarterback. It was old world versus new world. Play-stifling structure versus player empowerment. Kevin Stefanski didn't bench Shedeur because he was out of control. He benched him because he wasn't in control of him. And now, that decision isn't just backfiring. It might end up redefining the entire culture in Cleveland, one fractured meeting room at a time. The moment news dropped that Shedeur Sanders was being benched, the internet didn't react. It exploded. Within 17 minutes of the announcement, the Browns ticketing platform received over 3,000 refund requests. First Energy Stadium's phone lines were jammed. Season ticket holders threatened not just to cancel, but to protest. And that was just the beginning. In the team store, Sanders merch started coming back in droves. And not just in person. Fans were returning online orders while posting screenshots on social media with captions like, "If he's not playing, I'm not paying." Hashtags started trending. Hashtag free Shedeur, fire Stefanski, hashtag Cleveland Clown Show. And they weren't just trending locally, they were global. One clip of a Browns fan tossing a Stefanski jersey into a bonfire while wearing a Sanders hoodie hit 1 million views in 24 hours. TikToks, Twitter threads, YouTube reactions, even ESPN debate shows were now painting the Browns as the new NFL villain. But then came the number that stunned the ownership. 43% of all Browns merchandise sold this season? Shedeur Sanders. His jersey was outselling the next 5 players combined. Game day ticket sales? Up 37% since the Browns drafted him. TV ratings? Directly tied to whether or not he touched the field. And with Shedeur benched, estimates suggest tens of millions in potential losses just this month. Corporate sponsors had specifically requested Shedeur appearances. Instagram promos, TV deals, regional commercials, all built around the idea that Sanders wasn't just a player, he was a brand. By benching him, the team didn't just sideline a quarterback, they sidelined their most profitable asset. And let's be honest, in today's NFL, valuable doesn't just mean a cannon arm or elite reads. It means jerseys, clicks, engagement, commercials, and cultural reach. Shedeur brought all of that, and now he's sitting on the bench, while the franchise bleeds money from every corner. One decision, one ego, tens of millions at risk. And the worst part? The locker room is just as shaken as the balance sheet. If the locker room split was bad, what happened in the executive offices was worse. When the Shedeur Sanders benching was announced, Jimmy Haslam, owner of the Cleveland Browns, found out the same way fans did. Through social media. Not a call, not a meeting, just a tweet already going viral. According to sources, Haslam was livid. He immediately called an emergency meeting with the front office, demanding accountability, answers, and an explanation as to why the most marketable player in franchise history was sidelined without warning. And then, Kevin Stefanski refused to attend. His reported message was short and stone cold. "Football decisions are mine, until I'm terminated." That sentence might as well have been his resignation letter. Meanwhile, GM Andrew Berry was trapped in the middle, trying to support his coach without igniting a full-scale revolt from ownership, players, fans, or sponsors. And with every minute that passed, Berry's phone kept buzzing with calls from minority owners and league execs, asking the same question: what is happening in Cleveland? And those calls weren't just internal. Roger Goodell himself reportedly contacted Haslam, asking if the league needed to step in. TV networks and media partners were furious. National spotlight games that were sold on the promise of a Sanders-led storyline were suddenly at risk of plummeting ratings. Sponsors called, advertisers threatened. Because in the NFL, stars aren't just quarterbacks, they're investments. And when the most headline-grabbing rookie QB in the league becomes the center of a controversy driven by ego instead of performance, the entire entertainment machine starts grinding its gears. Even other team owners started quietly pointing fingers, worried that Cleveland's mess was about to become the league's embarrassment. ESPN aired a 17-minute Stephen A. rant. Shannon Sharpe said Stefanski should be escorted out of the building. Pat McAfee suggested a culture war was breaking the team from the inside. Skip Bayless called it career suicide, live-streamed in real time. The optics were torching Cleveland's credibility. And the NFL watches everything, counts everything, and hates anything that costs the Shield money, media deals, or momentum. Cleveland wasn't just losing games, they were losing the league. Sunday wasn't just a game, it was a reckoning. The Browns entered M&T Bank Stadium under a national microscope. Anger in the locker room, rage on social media, and Shedeur Sanders sitting silently on the bench, dressed, locked in, but ignored. Meanwhile, third-rounder Dillon Gabriel was handed the keys to the offense and thrown straight into a meat grinder. Within the first 5 minutes, the wheels came off. First pass attempt, batted at the line. Second throw, nearly intercepted. Third down, sack. 3 and out. Immediately, on the sideline, Browns fans were already chanting, "We want Shedeur." The Ravens smelled blood. Lamar Jackson didn't wait. He led a brutal, methodical drive that ended in 7 points before Stefanski could adjust his headset. But what followed was something Cleveland had avoided for nearly a year: a full-scale, public football meltdown. The Browns' offense looked terrified. Gabriel was clearly rattled. Receivers dropped passes they normally catch in pre-game warm-ups. Offensive linemen struggled to pick up basic blitzes. Play calls were conservative and desperate. The scoreboard, 21-0 by halftime. And the most brutal stat, Shedeur Sanders, 0 snaps. 0. Nada. Not even a trick package insertion. Stefanski refused to adjust. Cameras repeatedly cut to Shedeur, warming up, stretching, keeping himself ready. Every time they showed him on screen, the stadium got louder. National broadcasters couldn't ignore it. Analysts on air were openly questioning Stefanski's sanity. By the start of the fourth quarter, the game was over. So was any illusion of organizational unity. Final score, Ravens 41, Browns 6. A drubbing, a humiliation, the kind of loss that forces changes, not just to game plans, but to job titles. Inside the post-game tunnel, reports flooded in of heated arguments between players and coaches. Gabriel apologized to teammates. Stefanski stood unmoved. Van Pelt reportedly advocated pulling the plug mid-game and was denied. The locker room, divided, torn, furious. And somehow, even in the chaos, Shedeur kept his composure. Silent, professional, poised. But what the fans saw, and what the league now recognized, was something deeper. Cleveland didn't just bench their quarterback. They set fire to their season, in front of the entire world, amid the boos, the media firestorm, and the worst statistical loss of the season. Shedeur Sanders said nothing. No post-game tweet, no cryptic Instagram story, not even a sideline outburst when the camera panned to him for the 12th time in the second half. Just calm, still, collected. And if you're listening closely, that silence spoke louder than anything else that week. While Kevin Stefanski barked at assistants, while fans screamed for his firing, while the media obliterated Cleveland's credibility, Shedeur just stayed locked in. According to staffers, he was the first to arrive at the facility Monday morning. He signed every fan's jersey on the way in, took every photo, gave the kitchen staff a fist bump, sat in the film room, took notes on a game he never played in. No anger, just presence. And while that might seem passive, make no mistake, it was intentional. Sources say his father, Deion Sanders, told him to stay quiet. You'll win this with your actions, not your attitude. That advice? Golden. Because now, Shedeur owns the moral high ground. He looks like the professional, the leader, the grown-up, while the rest of the organization scrambles for damage control. In a league that often defines young quarterbacks by how they handle pressure, Shedeur's coolest move was never saying a word. And that silence? It became a conversation on. Media headlines shifted from Shedeur benched to how long can Cleveland keep ignoring this guy? Reporters praised his maturity under fire. Veterans in the locker room started switching sides, not because of a speech, but because of how Shedeur carried himself while the building burned. He didn't have to start a war. He just stood still while everyone else unraveled. And now, he doesn't need to push. The tide is already turning in his favor. Old heads call it poise. Younger fans call it power. But everyone, fans, teammates, sponsors, even executives, is asking the same question. How long can the Browns keep benching the most composed guy on the team? The worst losses don't always happen on the scoreboard. They happen behind closed doors, in meeting rooms, phone calls, and sideline arguments that never make it to the broadcast. But after that Ravens blowout, Kevin Stefanski didn't just lose a game, he lost the building. Veterans who had backed him quietly for years, done. Coordinators who had stayed silent to protect stability, fed up. Even GM Andrew Berry, once Stefanski's strongest advocate, reportedly spent 6 straight hours on damage control with ownership, staff, and business partners. Everyone wanted the same answer. What now? The locker room was broken. Players literally sat at opposite ends of the room, not because of ego, but because they didn't trust the direction anymore. Practice looked like a silent protest. Receivers ran half-effort routes. Defensive players didn't even look Gabriel's way during film study. And behind the scenes, it got worse. Sponsors started pulling back on activation plans. One executive predicted over $50 million in projected losses if Shedeur didn't suit up soon. Pressure started coming not just from Cleveland, but from Park Avenue, the NFL's main offices. League execs reportedly told ownership, "You're costing the Shield money now." By Monday morning, the Haslam family had run out of patience. They called an emergency meeting with Berry and top advisors. Stefanski was asked to attend. He refused. Again. According to a source, he told them, "If you want me gone, fire me. But I'm not putting Sanders in out of pressure." And so, that's exactly what they did. Within 24 hours, Stefanski was reassigned to a special advisor role. Organizational speak for, "You're out, but we'll pay you quietly." Alex Van Pelt was named interim head coach, and the first order of business announced Shedeur Sanders as the Week 10 starter. Officially. No walkbacks, no politics, no delay. The shift was immediate. And inside the building, team officials say it felt like a storm finally passed. Stefanski's removal wasn't just a coaching change. The very next morning, something changed in the building, and you could feel it before anyone spoke. Gone were the silent hallways. Gone were the invisible divides in the weight room, in the cafeteria, in practice walkthroughs. It didn't take weeks to fix. It took one announcement. Shedeur Sanders is the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. And just like that, the team started breathing again. Receivers walked a little taller. The huddle sounded sharper. Meeting rooms weren't dead silent, they were buzzing. Players were showing up early, staying later. Coaches weren't just running drills. They were coaching again. Eye contact that had disappeared weeks earlier was back. Why? Because for the first time all season, everyone agreed on the direction. And it all centered around one player with a quiet chip on his shoulder and a last name that had been weaponized since draft night. Shedeur didn't throw a victory parade. He didn't post on Instagram. He walked into the building, dapped up the staff, and won people over with actions, not ego. Coaches quickly noticed. His note-taking was meticulous. His command in the huddle, immediate. Teammates say he was holding guys accountable without barking, just setting the bar and expecting everyone to meet it. Even starters like Amari Cooper and David Njoku reportedly came up to Van Pelt and said, "This is the guy. Don't overcomplicate it. Just let him lead." Work felt different. It wasn't forced effort. It was momentum. The Browns weren't a team waiting on drama anymore. They were a team locked in, laser-focused, finally behind someone who didn't just want the spotlight, but actually earned it. And most importantly, Shedeur's composure never changed. Even with cameras rolling and expectations soaring, he never treated it like revenge, just business. The Browns were finally building around their quarterback, not in spite of them. And after everything, it was long overdue. Game day wasn't just a matchup, it was a mission. After weeks of controversy, silence, dysfunction, and pure organizational chaos, the Cleveland Browns walked into their Week 10 rivalry game against the Cincinnati Bengals, led by Shedeur Sanders. And from the first snap, it felt different. This wasn't a quarterback hoping to survive. This was a quarterback ready to take over. First drive, clinical. Quick reads, fast feet, poise in the face of pressure. 11-yard out to Amari Cooper. Slant to Njoku. Deep dig for 22 yards. Handoff, play fake, bootleg. First down, touchdown. The crowd, wearing more Sanders jerseys than the team store even stocked, erupted. Shedeur didn't flex, he didn't taunt. He walked calmly to the sideline and dapped up every teammate in the huddle. One drive down, statement made, and it didn't stop there. The Browns' offense ran smoother than it had all season, not because the playbook changed, but because the person running it finally fit. Shedeur managed tempo, adjusted formations, manipulated safeties, and made pro-level decisions on the fly. By halftime, 16 for 21, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns. Browns up 21-10. The city buzzing. On defense, Myles Garrett and the crew fed off the energy. Sacks, turnovers, swagger. And after every defensive stop, cameras panned to the bench where Shedeur calmly went over tape, already preparing for the next possession. Fourth quarter came, and instead of folding under pressure, he thrived. With the Bengals closing in, Sanders led a 75-yard drive capped by a no-look bullet to Amari Cooper in the back of the end zone. It was his third touchdown of the night. When the final whistle blew, the scoreboard read, Browns 31, Bengals 24. And just like that, the Browns went from fractured to formidable. Fans poured into comment sections calling it a new era. Players called Shedeur the future in the post-game presser. And the media, once split, united in the headline. Shedeur isn't next, he's now. This wasn't just a win for Cleveland, this was a reset. The Browns weren't just back in the playoff conversation, they were back in the conversation, period, with the right quarterback finally in control. When Kevin Stefanski benched Shedeur Sanders, it looked like a power move. Instead, it became a tipping point. One man's stubbornness triggered a chain reaction. Fans revolting, locker rooms dividing, sponsors pulling out, and the entire franchise teetering on collapse. The coach thought he was drawing a line in the sand. What he really did was push the future of the Cleveland Browns to its breaking point. And somehow, in the middle of that storm, Shedeur never blinked. He didn't beg for a start. He didn't fight on camera. He didn't post cryptic quotes on Instagram. He stayed quiet, prepared in the shadows, and waited for Cleveland to realize what the rest of the league already saw. He's not just capable. He's exactly what they've been missing all along. When Stefanski was forced out and Van Pelt stepped in, the shift was instant. Energy changed. Culture changed. Everything, down to body language in the tunnel, flipped. And when Shedeur got the ball, the offense didn't just function, it came alive. Against the Bengals, he didn't just win a football game. He won back the city. It wasn't just a quarterback debut. It was the unveiling of a new era, built not on excuses, not on rigid playbooks, but on leadership, confidence, and belief. Now the Browns have a face, a future, a foundation. It took Cleveland nearly 2 decades and one disastrous decision to finally get it right. But now, they have a quarterback who commands respect without saying a word. A locker room that follows because they've seen what he's about. And a city that's bought in 100%. The scars of the past, still there. The dysfunction, not forgotten. But for the first time in a long, long time, Cleveland football doesn't feel cursed. It feels dangerous, in a good way. Because when your franchise quarterback survives controversy, emerges stronger, and turns national doubt into dominance, that's not just a comeback story, that's the blueprint for a dynasty. And Shedeur Sanders just drew the first page.